Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Positively Trek Book Club. And as the name implies, we're talking about a book this week, and this particular book is a graphic novel of an IDW comic miniseries. And, of course, because it's comics, you know who I have here. You know who I have to have here. It's Brandi Jackala. Brandi, welcome back.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm tickled every time I get to do this.
Yay! Well, I'm always happy to have you here because, it's really just become a tradition of doing the comics with you. And there's so many comics. I had this dream of getting caught up on the comics, and the way we've been doing them is doing the omnibus editions as they come out. And my dream is getting caught up on the comics and then doing them as each issue comes out. But if we keep doing just the comic omnibuses, that's never going to happen because they're putting out more issues while we're waiting for the comic omnibus to come out. Mm-hmm. And it's a perpetual cycle that we've gotten ourselves into. I don't know how to get out of it other than to just keep talking about comics. So I guess that's what we're going to do.
Oh, darn. To have to keep talking about Star Trek comics. What a burden.
Well, it is a burden that we shall shoulder with aplomb. And
indeed.
And this week we are talking about Star Trek The Motion Picture, Echoes. And this is written by Mark Guggenheim with art by Oleg Chudakov. And first of all, that title, Star Trek The Motion Picture, Echoes, which places it in a particular place in the timeline. But I still just can't get my brain past seeing Star Trek The Motion Picture on the front of a comic. Mm-hmm. As the main title with a subtitle to that, because does that strike you as odd? It seems odd to me.
It is very odd and completely unnecessary.
I mean, you've got the pajama uniforms. You slap that on the cover, people are going to know that it's around this time.
Well, even if you don't have that on the cover, there are so many context clues within these comics that there is no reason why they had to put the motion picture on there. There really just isn't. I mean, you can take a look at the cover of the first issue and know exactly what time period it is.
Which, don't get me wrong, I appreciate. I like this period of time. I think it's unique. I think it's interesting. Visually, maybe not the most colorful or, eye-catching period, but it's of a time, right? It's definitely a period I enjoy exploring. And I really liked that aspect of this.
Well, agreed, because honestly, we don't really get a lot of information on what happened between the motion picture and Wrath of Khan. Mm-hmm. So this is basically new territory for us. There isn't a whole lot known from right after.
Yeah.
Hey, yay, we saved the Earth. V'ger is now some enlightened human cyborg being somewhere, we think, maybe with Ilea too. I don't know. There's just so many questions. But this is about none of that.
Yeah. And this is an interesting thing because that period in between Star Trek The Motion Picture and Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan has kind of been the subject of a bunch of non-canon stuff that what happened? Did Kirk immediately go back and retake his admiral post? Well, no, according to the years, how they line up and other adventures being put in there, whether it's in the novels or whatever, apparently he stayed captain of the Enterprise and led a second 5-year mission. And that all happened, which is funny. We have, 79 episodes, probably about 200 novels, and who knows how many comics all set in that first 5-year mission, such that there's no possible way that all of those things happened. It's just, there's no time left in there. And yet we apparently have this second 5-year mission with, a good number of novels and comics and stuff, but I feel like there's a lot more room there for stuff that hasn't really been taken advantage of.
I agree completely. And I would welcome filling in those blanks, frankly.
Mm-hmm. It's a good thing we're talking about this comic then, because this takes place there and kind of, we'll get to the plot points that I kind of thought were going to be followed up on, and I thought we were going to see kind of complete here, but we don't really. But yeah, we'll get there. So it's 5 issues. It's a 5-issue miniseries. Let's just get into issue number 1 here. So we see a one-person fighter in this pitched battle, and there's this strange space anomaly. The fighter gets damaged and pulled into the anomaly, and it emerges in proximity to the Enterprise, and it's the gorgeous refit Enterprise.
So pretty.
So beautiful. So this ship and its occupant is brought aboard, and she's remaining helmeted. We can't see her face. It's all mysterious and stuff. She fights the Enterprise crew, eventually taking Spock hostage in this neck hold. And I loved this whole sequence.
Yes.
Because it's pretty apparent Spock is just letting himself be taken hostage, and Kirk tells her as much. During all this, she recognizes Chekov as Acris, calling him a war criminal and claiming he is wanted by the sovereignty for 18 separate acts of genocide. Interesting. So that's a little weird. Like I said, Spock is merely acting like she has the drop on him, throwing her aside effortlessly when he's ordered to by Kirk. She finally removes her helmet, revealing herself to be General Nyota Uhura. So first thing, I guess, I like that they didn't stretch that mystery out over the whole comic. Like, as it is, it's kind of funny that she has her helmet on as long as she does, but they make plot excuses for that. But yeah, this is revealed fairly quickly. She's apparently from a parallel universe where this Acris person has unleashed the power of a Bajoran Orb that they call the Nightbringer to devastating effect. Kirk wants to hunt this Acris guy down. Starfleet has reservations because he is supposed to be back at Starfleet Command fulfilling his duties as director of Starfleet operations. And this admiral is kind of ticked off that Kirk is still taking the shakedown cruise following the V'ger thing. At the end of this issue, they track down Acris's ship, but he escapes into the neutral zone and is surrounded by Romulan birds of prey. So that's where we leave issue number 1. So first of all, thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, well, I was thinking, oh, no, not another mirror universe. But it doesn't seem to be the mirror universe. It's yet another alternate universe. And they know about Bajoran Orbs. Nice shout out. Nice different way to go about this. Especially as it kind of ties in to the whole Day of Blood stuff as well. Because,
a little bit, yeah.
You know, Bajoran Orbs and how powerful they can be. Yeah, that's a good idea. Have a Bajoran Orb of destruction. What? Just, why would you do that?
Why can't we have like the Bajoran Orb of candy canes or the Bajoran Orb of happy thoughts? Like, come on.
the Bajoran Orb of having a 1-hour nap a day.
Oh, yes. Oh, man. We need to like come up with our top 10 Bajoran Orbs.
Yes. The non-existent Bajoran Orbs because...
The Bajoran Orb of chocolate.
Oh. The Bajoran Orb of getting a massage.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. I'm obviously very tired and need a massage.
I came up with candy canes and chocolate. I think I must be hungry.
Candy canes are delicious. Hey, candy canes and chocolate. It's the candy cane and chocolate orb. Because
that's what happens when you open those orbs facing each other.
Yeah, mint and chocolate go well together.
Oh, yeah.
So
the orb of after 8. There we go.
Oh, we could spend the rest of the podcast talking about that, but we're not going to. But I appreciated the fact that it's not the same old mirror universe thing that we're getting here, because we've seen that done a bit to death, I feel. And it's very clear that there are, multiple realities that, because quantum physics. So thanks for using a different one. And she was using very different language, different swear words, different different everything. And so that was my first tip off, was how she was talking to her ship's computer. I'm like, Not Mirror Universe. This is something else.
Yeah, and different references to mythology and stuff and that kind of thing. That was interesting. Like different, like you said, curses. And I wonder what the process of coming up with those was. That sounds like fun.
It probably was a brainstorming thing where a bunch of people just started writing stuff down and then they threw it against a wall and see what stuck.
So yeah, I enjoyed this. I think it's an interesting setup. There's enough things there that are kind of grabbing my attention. The doppelganger thing. Now, this is where I thought at this point when I was reading this issue, I thought that eventually we would meet everybody's doppelganger and it would be some kind of thing like that. I'm kind of almost glad they didn't go that route. This was a smaller story than I thought it was, although it gets political and bigger later, but it's interesting. And I like that they've kind of restrained themselves in this story. I feel like there's kind of the temptation to really go all out with something like this, but there's lots that I enjoyed in this. I really, like I said, I liked that ruse by Spock where he's, just allowing, I can so see that scene playing out too, where Spock's just letting himself be put in this neck lock and finally he's like, okay, just throws her off.
Yeah, well, it's funny because he tries to do the Vulcan nerve pinch on her and it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And he's he's doing it and he's like, this isn't going to hurt. And she says, yeah, it doesn't. And then she just grabs him. But I think for the most part, the Spock steals all of the scenes in this first issue.
Yeah, and that's a theme that'll come back again, I think, in this story as well.
Agree.
Also, shout out to that gorgeous 2-page splash of the Enterprise. I would kill to be able to draw the ship like that. That is beautiful.
It really, truly is. It's breathtaking, as in I caught my breath when I looked at it. It was just, yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and it's just, that scene in the motion picture where they take, 9 minutes around the ship's exterior and how Kirk is looking at the Enterprise is how I'm looking at this layout because it's just exquisite. Absolutely exquisite.
So I love Uhura's hair in the motion picture. I love that she was finally able to have her natural curls while playing that character. That said, I love this alternate Uhura's kind of I don't know what that style of haircut is called, but like it's kind of matted to her head and swept to the side. She looks really good like that too. I could see her sporting that.
Yeah, it's almost a pixie cut.
Just about, yeah.
But with longer bangs.
Like the more not exactly what I mean, but like the more goth Mirror Universe version of the pixie cut almost. Mm-hmm. And I say Mirror Universe, I know it's not, but like I'm kind of thinking like Ezri in the Mirror Universe or something like that kind of severe look.
Yes.
The other thing, and I kind of alluded to this when we were talking at the start, when the Admiral was talking to Kirk saying, we need you back at headquarters to resume your role as the head of Starfleet operations, I thought, oh, okay, so this story is going to be IDW's answer to like what all happens between the motion picture and Wrath of Khan. And I really thought the story would end with him either going against what previous stories have done and saying he just goes back to Starfleet to stay an admiral and is an admiral until we see him again in Star Trek 2, or this was going to be where he goes, to heck with you, I'm taking the Enterprise on a 5-year mission, and I guess Starfleet agrees to that or something. But that doesn't really get addressed in this story at all.
It doesn't, and it's kind of disappointing.
It almost makes me wonder if they have or had, I don't know, plans to kind of do more of these and continue that story kind of in the vein of like a Star Trek Year 5 that they did or something like that. But I don't know. I don't know how well these sold. I don't know if that would impact a decision of doing something like this, but it kind of made me wonder if like they kind of planted that in issue 1 and then never really resolved it. So is that a seed that some future story might pick up and continue?
Guess we'll find out, or not.
Or not.
If we never get it, then we know.
Yeah. Well, that's issue 1. And like I said, definitely it's got me intrigued. I'm intrigued. I'm curious to see where this goes. And also Romulans. I like Romulans in the TOS. It's usually Klingons. With Kirk, it's always Klingons. So I'm excited to see the Romulan angle play out here.
Yes, it's a nice switch up. Klingons have been done to death in TOS. No, I'm just kidding. That's not really true. But
well, let's move on to issue number 2. And this is just what these are titled. There's no like separate titles like some comic issues have. It's just issue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So issue number 2, we see that on the Romulan ship, Akris is hoping to strike a deal in order to save his own life. And this is exactly what alternate Uhura suggests that he would do. And she's not very pleased about this. But Kirk suggests that alternate Uhura should steal a shuttlecraft, along with Kirk and Sulu as hostages. And I find it interesting, the alternate Uhura's appraisal of Kirk and how well he likes to follow the rules.
yes, bends them almost to the point of breaking, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Chekov and Uhura want to tag along because, of course, they're kind of going through their whole thing with these doppelgangers that are floating around now. I could say, pretty obviously they would come in handy if you're dealing with doppelgangers. I think that's a pretty good reason for them to go on the mission. So they take the shuttlecraft, they enter the neutral zone and are discovered by a Romulan bird of prey. They manage to warp away. They do the thing. I pictured it like a bad guy who's trying to get away from somewhere and he gets pulled over by the cops and he waits until the cops are like right at the window before he guns it and floors it. So they have to run back to their cruiser. It's basically what they do with this shuttlecraft and the bird of prey. But they lead the Romulan ship to this base where Akris is being held. They've determined that he's at this Romulan starbase. They do this thing where Kirk boards the station, maintaining the act that alternate Uhura has taken Kirk hostage. It is, of course, actually our Uhura in disguise. They've traded clothing. Like I said, those doppelgangers come in handy.
They do.
The rest of the people that are along with them, so the alternate Uhura, Chekov, and Sulu, are hiding in cargo containers and surprise the Romulans when they board the shuttle, which I'm going to maintain a count of the number of times the Romulans are surprised by things that they really ought not to be surprised by.
Right?
Hey. These are not very competent Romulans.
They really aren't, but to be fair, I think they sent the gruntiest of grunts down there.
Yeah, but by the end of these issues, there's just a pile of them in the corner that they keep knocking out because, anyway.
And yeah, don't get me started on the whole knocking somebody out thing. We all know how I feel about that.
So, after they take out these Romulans that have come to apprehend them and failing spectacularly at it, they set these explosives to scuttle the shuttle, which a scuttled shuttle, that sounds fun. Anyway, so while the Romulans are questioning Akris, alternate Uhura, Sulu, and Chekov burst in. Alternate Uhura attacks Akris, but then Romulan reinforcements arrive. So that's kind of the cliffhanger we're left at the end of this issue. So stuff's happening aboard the Romulan station, basically.
Stuff and things. Definitely those things.
So this issue, I'm enjoying it. I'm liking the back and forth. I'm liking the writing. I'm enjoying the banter between the characters. And I think Kirk is very Kirky, for better or for worse at some points. And I'm just kind of digging this. I'm liking the dynamic. I'm liking the, Kirk going half cocked in this shuttlecraft that we're going to maintain that we were kidnapped by this alternate Uhura. But the Romulans don't even know there's an alternate Uhura. So basically it is just Uhura. So if the Romulans are paying attention to their, intelligence reports and stuff, they should be like, she's your communications officer. What are you talking about?
You would think that they'd know that, wouldn't you?
But it's still fun. It's. I like the subterfuge. I like the ploys and stuff. It's fun.
And Kirk, at all points, just seems to be completely unconcerned with whatever situation they're in.
Yeah, he's
like, nah, it's fine.
He's very Maverick in this. He's just like, oh yeah, I have a quip. I have a quip. So I do have a couple of little quibbles. I really dislike, both in comics and in novels, when, for example, Chekov's accent is written out.
Thank you.
I
Same.
do not like that. We know how Chekov sounds. We can do that in our head. And so when they do it on some words that that's not even right. It's just, it takes me right out of it. It really annoys me.
It's hard to read. For one thing. It's like, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do any of that. And I find it offensive, actually.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's completely unnecessary, I think. The other thing is, I feel like the only reason we recognize Chekov as Chekov is his hair and the shape of his hair. When you've got this actress guy who is supposedly Chekov, but just with a different hairstyle, he looks like generic white guy number 3 to me. I do not get Chekov from his face. And then once I realized that, I looked at like our Chekov and I was like, oh, he's just generic white guy with Chekov's hairstyle. That's how I recognize him as Chekov. So I was finding that not really working.
Yeah, well, overall, I feel like the artwork is inconsistent. That sometimes you can really tell who somebody is, and sometimes it's like, wait, is this Sulu? Is this Sulu? Is this Chekov? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to get context clues from other things going on the page or from dialogue. But sometimes I'm just like, that, if I were a complete noob to Star Trek comics, it's my test of, can I show this to somebody and say, pick out who Kirk is, and they'd know? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So that's what I mean by the inconsistency.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good art and a lot of really just kind of
generic
art in this, for sure. Like there's a couple shots of, I guess he's not alternate Chekov, he's Akris. There's a lot of shots of him where like I'm like, that's Han Solo. Like,
I know, right? Yeah, well, after things start happening, which we'll talk about in the next issues, I just started calling him Bester in my head.
That's what I was kind of thinking of too while I was reading this, because he doesn't have the Chekov accent, which I guess, to be fair, we wouldn't know if they hadn't have given our Chekov that accent in writing. So maybe there's actually a purpose to it, but
I still find it offensive.
I still don't like I still don't like it. But it is interesting that he doesn't have that affectation. So I was kind of thinking of like, oh, when have I heard Walter Koenig playing a role without the Bester? Yeah, okay. So I could kind of put that voice on it.
Which is what I did too. By the way, guys, if you haven't watched Babylon 5, what the hell's wrong with you?
Right. Absolutely. 100%. One other little thing I just like when they pull from other sources, and that Romulan space station, I'm pretty sure I've seen it before, and I'm like, is that from Armada? Like Star Trek Armada? I don't know. I've seen a Romulan starbase that looks like that in something else, and I think it was Star Trek Armada, the video game. So that's pretty cool. Nice pull for reference there.
Indeed. I wouldn't have known that because I have never played Star Trek Armada, so...
Oh, great game back in the day. I miss it. This episode of Positively Trek is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. A special thank you to our Constitution class supporters, Jim Stoffel, Joyce Murin, and Paul D. Kinnear. To help out with the podcast, visit patreon.com/positivelytrek, where for a small monthly donation, you can get early access to ad-free episodes, shoutouts, exclusive content, associate producer credits, and more. Thank you so much for listening, and live long and prosper. All right, well... Issue number 3. So we've got Kirk and Uhura in the brig on the Romulan station, and they pull the sick prisoner routine, and it works. Even though they hang a lantern on it, and they say, wow, you fell for the oldest trick in the book. again, the Romulans, these are not their best.
Mm-mm.
They're putting in a pretty poor showing in all of these issues.
Yeah, they're probably all going to get executed.
Yeah. So Kirk and Uhura escape thanks to that little ploy. Meanwhile, the Romulans and Akris have taken the others prisoner in the shuttle bay, but the shuttle exploding allows them to escape. So they've planted these charges on the shuttle. It blows up. They're kind of able to get away, but alternate Uhura insists on going after Akris. When she misses him and can't get him, Sulu and Chekov eventually convince her to come along with him, and they steal Akris's ship to escape the station. So they get away. They're presumably going to go back to the Enterprise, and Akris is still at large and with the Romulans. Meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, Starfleet orders the Enterprise to remain outside the neutral zone. I love this conversation, by the way, between Spock and Admiral Muhammad.
Yes.
We'll come back to that because it is so good. I'm sticking a pin in that. We have to remember to come back to that. After that, we get some like classic, almost TOS level Spock and McCoy interaction here, where they're kind of bickering like they would in the original series whenever Kirk's gone, especially in the Tholian web I was thinking of.
Indeed.
But, and this is when Akris's ship arrives with Sulu, Chekov, and alternate Uhura. They come back to the Enterprise here. Meanwhile, back on the station, Kirk and Uhura get to the armory and disguise themselves as Romulan soldiers, thanks to those lovely helmets that were invented in the original series, so they didn't have to give so many extras Romulan pointy ear makeup. So it all comes around. It's helpful.
Yeah, sometimes I appreciate that they take those little touches and put them in this comic. Hanging a lantern on, hey, this thing, yeah, remember that? Yeah, we're going to use that for the reason for which it was intended, which is hiding ears.
I like that, yeah. We don't have ears. Helmet. Meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, McCoy is working to save Chekov, who is badly injured. While outside, Sulu and alternate Uhura discuss their differing viewpoints on what took place. And there's some interesting philosophical stuff I like that they discuss here. There are different kind of philosophies, I guess, about life and that sort of thing. So Uhura's vendetta against this guy and the horrible things he's done, this Akris, and Sulu saying, our objectives aren't a vendetta. They're not to kill this guy. And it's interesting. I like that.
Well, that's the thing about truth is that really an absolute, because truth very frequently relies on our own points of view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I took that from Star Wars. It's like that whole thing you told me Vader murdered, murdered my father. Well, Anakin stopped being himself when he became Darth Vader, so what I told you was the truth from a certain point of view. And I'm like...
From a certain point of view?
Which is how people can twist the truth to make it anything they want it to be in order to get what they want.
Absolutely. So the subject of what they're talking about, of course, Akris, he's currently working with the Romulans to furnish him with a ship to test the Nightbringer. And it's going to be this super advanced new prototype ship. And then we get this bit where Kirk and Uhura find the Nightbringer and are trying to figure out how to destroy it, but then it's beamed away before they can destroy it. Which, it seems to be a bit of a theme in this story as well that seems to keep kind of happening.
Yeah, it sure does. It's a game of Hunt the Nightbringer, which, honestly, the name of it just makes me giggle because all I can think of is some dark villain in Dungeons and Dragons, because that's what that sounds like. Beware of the Nightbringer.
I feel like if this were a live action thing, Spock would his eye would shoot up every time he's forced to say Nightbringer. Mm-hmm. And we must find the Nightbringer. Well, the final little bit in this issue is we learn that McCoy has been able to stabilize Chekov. His condition is stable, but in order to survive, he will need a blood transfusion. And this transfusion would have to come from someone who's an exact genetic match. Well, lucky, I guess?
But that's my question. That right there is where I kind of just go, no. Because just because this person looks like Chekov, has all the same basic physical features, does not mean that internally they are a genetic match to Chekov. And assuming that they are is ridiculous. He is from a different universe with different building blocks. He is not going to be a genetic match. Anyway.
Well, for the purposes of this story, he is.
Yeah, I know. But that was the part where they kind of lost me, and I'm just like, no.
See, now that's funny because it kind of lost me at that part a little bit for different reasons. And it was for reasons that I thought the story might get into, which is like, what are the ethics of this? Like, he's not going to agree to give them blood for a transfusion. So like, and I mean, I didn't know at this point how the story was going to play out, what was going to happen, but extrapolating and thinking through scenarios, I'm like, just because he's their prisoner, does that mean they can strap him down and take out his blood? Like, I don't think so. Like, consent is still a thing, even if you're a prisoner, and especially a civilization like the Federation would very much respect that. So I was kind of thinking like, hey, pretty cool that you have this guy, but
yeah, that was fishy too. Just the fact that they're like, oh, we'll just get some blood from him. Have you met Bester Chekov? I mean, because he's not going to let you do that. Yeah. So that whole situation seemed a little contrived for me. It's like,
that's the other thing.
We got to have a reason for Chekov to need this Acris guy. What can we figure out? And that was just a weird way to go about it. Didn't like it.
So overall, how do you feel about where the story's going? I guess that kind of little bit of a left turn at the end kind of left a bit of a bad taste in your mouth by the sounds of it.
It did. And at this point I'm like, okay, maybe we can still right the ship here. Haha. But I was kind of, basically my interest did start to wane in this issue because of the aforementioned reasons. And I thought, oh, are they going to be able to stick the landing on this one? I just don't know. So that's where I was at the end of this issue when I first read it. Well, and when I reread it too.
Well, let's talk about Spock's conversation with the Admiral.
Yes, please.
I really enjoyed this.
Everything with Spock is so perfect.
Absolutely. First of all, Spock says, I am a Vulcan. I cannot lie.
Lie.
And yeah, exactly. And to be fair, in true Spock fashion, he doesn't lie, but he omits and he not prevaricates. He tells the truth that he knows will be taken a certain way, and he doesn't mean it that way. So like, what is the difference between that and lying? I would contend not very much, but in Spock's mind, he's still walked that line and somehow come out the other end feeling okay with how he's conducted himself.
Well, lies of omission are still lies. If you don't tell a person everything, then you are committing a lie of omission.
Mm-hmm. I just love this dialogue, though. So she says to him, Commander Spock, your orders are to maintain the Enterprise's position outside the neutral zone. Under no circumstances are you to enter Romulan space. Are we clear? Yes, Admiral. I said, are we clear? And I responded in the affirmative. And yet, for some reason, I seem to find myself in need of reassurance, which I am only too happy to provide, Admiral. Given that Vulcans are incapable of happiness, Mr. Spock, I take that comment to be as full of crap as the rest of this conversation. Muhammad out.
Racism, Vulcans are. They can feel happiness. Gosh, learn about your guy, lady.
Also, he's only half Vulcan.
Yeah.
So,
Half Vulcan, half human. But see, that's the thing. It's like, oh, Vulcans don't have emotions. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Therefore, he can be happy if he so chooses to express that.
Exactly. And yeah, we'll get to a moment where he expresses some a little later. But this conversation between McCoy and Spock afterwards as well, I felt really harkened back to old school Spock-McCoy interactions. For better or worse. Actually, like, I used to really like the episode The Tholian Web, but man, did like Spock and McCoy's bickering really tires me out by the end of that episode. The conversations here are a little smarter. I like Spock kind of getting to the root of the issue with McCoy, and McCoy kind of sussing out, like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, my desire to retire is selfish. And, oh, I didn't say that. And it's interesting. I like the subject matter here, and how the two of them can kind of get at the root of each other's psyche a little bit.
It's true. McCoy has always been sort of a double-edged sword for me, even from childhood, because I always just felt like, why are you being so racist?
Yeah.
Stop calling him a green-blooded Vulcan. I mean, you don't have to refer to his race and species or his internal organs. That's racism, dude. It's racism. Stop being a Southern doctor, for heaven's sake. So, yeah. So this was just more of the, McCoy saying offensive things and Spock going inside. Just like, whatever.
I saw a recent meme about McCoy as well, and how, like, he immediately goes to someone's background when insulting them, and it's not just Spock. So, are you out of your Vulcan mind? He says to Spock. And in particular, they were talking about Carl Urban's McCoy in this one. But when he talks to Kirk, are you out of your corn-fed mind? It's like, yeah, it's still Kirk's background, and the fact that he grew up on a farm, I guess, sticks in McCoy's craw or something.
What's wrong with being born in Iowa?
Oh, you're all corn-fed, whatever that means.
And corn is delicious if you prepare it right.
Here.
Lots of butter, lots of salt.
Well, let's move on to issue number 4. And first of all, the cover of issue number 4. Now that's Chekov. Like, that guy looks like Chekov. There we go.
Yeah. And it looks like Chekov playing Bester. So
yes, totally.
Like he's basically Bester in that cover.
So issue number 4, we start, and I really enjoy the beginning of this issue. We start in Paris in the president's office, and we have Ambassador Nonculus, speaking of Star Trek VI, expressing outrage at the treaty violations by Kirk and his crew. Admiral Muhammad answers back with the Romulans' own transgressions in this whole debacle. And the president, I really like her, this Andorian president. She basically orders Kirk and crew out of the neutral zone, but at the same time stands firm against the Romulans, making it clear that the Federation will not stand for Romulan aggression. So I think, like, a lot of times the Federation kind of gets painted as the pushovers of the galaxy a little bit. And I like that she was very firm with the Romulan. Like, yes, you make some good points. He should return the ship and get out of the neutral zone, but you watch your butts. Like, do not push me on this. I like that.
Yeah, I think that people tend to believe that if you have a group of worlds that make up the Federation and it's peaceful, they're like, oh, they're pushovers. No. Just because they're peaceful doesn't mean they won't fight back if provoked. Because anyone will fight to preserve their way of life. And that, for, whether for good or ill. So, yeah, go ahead, poke the bear, see what happens.
The president's wondering where Kirk is now, and we see that he and Uhura are beaming aboard the Romulan prototype ship, this Raptor, still hunting for the Nightbringer. Meanwhile, the need for Acris's blood means that there's a quandary for alternate Uhura in that she wants to fulfill her vendetta, and kill Akris, but the Enterprise crew needs him alive. She interprets, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. This guy needs to die to preserve millions of lives. And this one person's life isn't worth all that. Meanwhile, the Romulans show up to take possession of the stolen ship, but it apparently is no longer aboard. Spock was not lying when he spoke to the Romulan officer. Spock apparently set it adrift, which is like a surprise to the whole bridge crew, which I thought was weird. Like, why wouldn't he just tell them? He just wanted to have this really cool mic drop moment, I guess. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Meanwhile, alternate Uhura steals her ship back, which apparently isn't surprising to Spock. He had calculated a 66% chance that she would succeed in doing that. And she speeds off into the neutral zone where, of course, they cannot follow her because Starfleet has ordered them not to. But tracking her, Spock surmises that she is tracking Akris and that he and the Romulans are planning on testing this weapon, the Nightbringer, on an uninhabited planet. Back on the Raptor, Akris and the Romulans are kind of having this banter, I guess, this back and forth, until alternate Uhura's ship shows up with no life signs, and the Romulans promptly destroy it. Of course, we know she's not on board.
Of course.
Yeah. The Romulans think she is. They're like, problem solved. Akris is like, I don't think so. We'll stick a pin in that, though.
Did you scan it? Did you scan it to see if there were any life forms aboard?
They did, and there was no life forms aboard, is what they said. So
yeah, so destroying it doesn't mean that she's dead. Duh!
Yeah, exactly.
Who are these guys?
The Romulans are, this guy just shows up and is like, I have this weapon, and they're like, okay, here's our best ship. I don't know. They're weird.
Apparently, Romulan starbases are like Starbase 80.
There you go. Or just this one is, I guess.
Definitely this one is. Maybe totally. All of them.
Oh. So like I said, Akris thinks alternate Uhura is still alive. She is. He and the Romulans, in the meantime, prepare for their test on this planet Gallus 3, which, of course, is inhabited with a pre-warp civilization. They're going to be the guinea pigs, which is apparently a confusing idiom to Spock, but not actually. He's just yanking McCoy's chain, I guess.
I really love that close-up of just the corners of his mouth tipping upward. His little secret smile of gotcha.
Yeah, and then McCoy's, I really hate you sometimes.
Yeah. That's okay, McCoy. Sometimes I feel the same way about you.
So back on the Raptor, Kirk and Uhura locate the Nightbringer. They beam to its location, and there, of course, they encounter Akris. And back on the Enterprise, Spock prepares to fire on the Raptor to save the people of Gallus 3, even though this would spell doom for Akris, and by extension, Chekov, because, gosh darn it, we really need that guy's blood. And if he fires on that ship, obviously he's automatically going to die, apparently forgetting until next issue that they can be more precise with their shots. But we've got to have a cliffhanger.
Yeah, so convenient. God, I love cliffhangers. You know how much I love cliffhangers.
So thoughts on issue number 4?
Yeah, there are parts of this story that I'm still enjoying, and there are parts of it that I very much am not. And the whole Chekov thing, it really just rubbed me the wrong way. So I was just like, is this something you just invented specifically for this situation? Because I don't remember hearing about this particular problem with Chekov ever before. So if it's something that's just invented, it sounds like somebody's playing a really bad improv game. So it's like, okay, well, you have to yes and everything I do. So, he can only have his own blood transfused into him. That's why we have kept some frozen for him, but we don't have access to that. So, yes and me. We'll have to get Akris because he would be a perfect genetic match. Sure, yeah, I have to yes and you, so yeah, sure, let's do that.
The crew of the Enterprise here is like the reverse Shinzon. Because, Shinzon, that's why he wanted Picard. I guess they're not the reverse Shinzon, they just are Shinzon.
Yeah. It just feels, that whole thing just feels really contrived and out of place to me.
Yeah. There's definitely things like, for example, the thing I mentioned with Spock just not mentioning that he and Scotty jettisoned the ship. Like, I feel like that's just an order he would have given from the bridge, and like everybody would know that he did that. And like, why did he be so secretive just so he could say like, "Bah, I wasn't lying. We left the ship adrift." I don't know. That just for the like the sheer mic drop aha moment was kind of like, it struck me as odd. And then at the very end of the issue, like when I was reading this issue, I was like, why don't you just take out their engines or something, or target their weapon systems? Like, why does firing on them mean Chekov is doomed? And then sure enough, page 1 of the next issue, they're like, but we can just target their engines. I'm like, yeah, I know. I also watched Star Trek.
I know, right? It's almost like I feel I feel like this is somebody who has never watched Star Trek and has instead been given a vague idea, like a loose outline of what story they want done. And so they're just like, oh, crap, that doesn't work. Okay, well, how about if we just do... It's like a kid playing, with their own imagination. And... Mm-hmm. Like how when kids play and they're like, I got you, you're dead now. No, I'm not, because this. Just, stuff
I
like that.
I activated my personal shields.
Yeah. So you can't get me now. So yeah. That's a little bit what it feels like.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a little bit, your improv game, I can't get that out of my head. Like, it does feel like, oh, how do we get out of this? Well, blah, blah, blah. Oh, wait, but blah, blah. Yeah, it just feels like it was writing yourself into a corner and then saying, well, actually, yeah, just like you said with the kids game. That makes perfect sense. That's a great analogy.
That's just how it feels to me.
Well, let's see how they wrap everything up. Let's move on to issue number 5, which, first thing I'm going to say right off the bat, the cover for issue number 5. We've got alternate Uhura and alternate Chekov,
Bester.
Or Bester or Acris or whatever we want to call them. They're struggling on the cover. Look at the phaser Uhura has. That's like a Picard era, like TNG era phaser. Look at the disruptor that Acris is holding. I'm just noticing now is like a 24th century Romulan disruptor. Like, no.
Well, technically, if these were things from their own universe, you can get away with that because they could have different levels of technology. Just because these two people exist in our universe at this time, that doesn't mean these two people are actually from the same time period in their universe.
That's true, but I read the story and they don't have those weapons, so...
Agreed. I'm just saying, if there was a reason for it, that could be it, but there's no reason for that. There's really not.
And trust me, I went through all the mental gymnastics to try and,
justify
and
you
could, but like, no, just don't put those on the cover. That's, no.
Is it just because it looked cool? Is that why we did this?
I guess so. I don't know. I would be curious. I never want to go to the well of the people involved don't know Star Trek, but it's very possible that the cover artist for this issue just looked up phaser, saw that, looked up Romulan weapon, saw that. That's my guess. And they're just not familiar with the different timelines of Star Trek and when things take place, which is fine. Not everyone has to, but like some editor or somebody should have caught that.
Agree.
That's my rant for this issue, which is good. We got it over early.
Yes. Well done.
So issue number 5, Spock fires on the Raptor, but of course, as we said, aiming for the engines, hoping to disable the ship, not destroy it. It's at this point, and again, this kind of fits in with your theory of like, oh, we need Spock to know that Kirk and Uhura are on the Raptor. Well, he surmises it at this point. He says, logically, they should be on the Raptor. Okay, yeah, there we go. So Spock surmises that Kirk and Uhura are on board, which isn't out of character, but the timing of it is, it feels to me like the writer didn't realize that Spock doesn't know that. And for the purposes of the story, he needs to know that now.
Yeah.
So Akris is about to kill Uhura, thinking that she is General Uhura, when General alternate Uhura bursts in and does a superhero landing, by the way.
Yes, she does.
It's not good for your ankles, just FYI.
You can break an ankle that way, and that hurts.
And of course, they start fighting. So Akris is occupied with alternate Uhura, and our Uhura and Kirk take that opportunity to try and destroy the Nightbringer. And they're about to do so, but the Romulans beam it away to somewhere called Location Kurog, which turns out to be the planet's surface.
Oops.
This Nightbringer is just always beaming away right when our heroes get to it.
Stupid Nightbringer.
So on the Enterprise, Spock realizes that since they beamed it to the surface, their shields are down for a split second for a short period of time. So in that time, Sulu and McCoy go to the transporter room because that's how transporters work at this time. And we see them going to the turbolift. So in the very short time, apparently, that they're beaming this down, that their shields are down, Spock beams Sulu to the planet's surface and McCoy to the location of Kirk and Uhura on the Raptor.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what to say about that. We'll just move on.
I have no words.
Oh my god. So alternate Uhura has Akris in a headlock. Lots of headlocks in these issues.
So many.
And she's about to kill him. And Kirk and Uhura try to talk her down. And I do have to say at this point in the story, I like what they did with her character here, where you think like, oh, it's a Star Trek thing. They're going to talk to her about justice and how every life is important. And she's like, I don't care, and snaps his neck.
Yep.
And Akris is dead now.
Yeah. My first thought is, whoa, she really actually followed through. My second thought was, you can get blood out of a dead person.
Yeah.
Does it have to be warm? No.
In fact, we refrigerate blood quite regularly.
So just take the blood. Problem solved.
So McCoy arrives there, hoping to still be able to use Akris's blood for Chekov. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Sulu is engaged with the Romulans in a firefight over the Nightbringer. And I actually really enjoyed this part of the story, even though it kind of also fits your hypothesis about like the little kid. Well, then this one worked for me. So they're like, Spock's like, destroy the Nightbringer, then you have no reason to fight. And Sulu's like, well, we didn't bring any explosive charges. And right next to him, they like beam a bunch down, and he's like, oh, okay, thanks. I love that. I really liked that.
I laughed out loud at that, actually. It's just like, sure.
Yeah, why
Okay.
not? That's
Fine.
hilarious.
It's no more ridiculous than some of the other things that have been in this series, so go for it. I'm here for it.
I did enjoy that. We didn't bring any explosive charges down. Thanks. So, they're under fire on the planet's surface. McCoy and the group on the Raptor are also under fire as he's working to extract the blood that he needs. The consent thing that I worried about a few issues ago is not a concern now. He did. This part of the story next actually bugged me a bit. So Spock tries to get the Romulans to stand down by telling them, the Nightbringer has been destroyed. You have no reason to fight. And the Romulans are like, no, it hasn't. What are you talking about? Arm it and detonate it, or arm it and activate it kind of thing. Why wouldn't Spock confirm that had been done before he basically let the Romulans know that they're trying to destroy it right now? That seemed weird.
It is weird. I didn't understand that at all.
Like, he calculated everything out so perfectly before, like the 66% chance that alternate Uhura would do the thing and all of this stuff. But in this case, he underestimates the time it takes Sulu to blow something up. That's what happened here, I guess.
It's just weird and unnecessary.
Yeah, it just was a very strange story decision to have him alert the Romulans to that, basically, which makes them start the firing sequence for the Nightbringer. And then now Sulu blows it up. Now it blows up and they beam aboard in the nick of time. And Spock says basically, see. And yeah, from there, he negotiates with the Romulans a ceasefire, an exchange of prisoners, and retreat to their respective spaces. So that gets all tied up and negotiated by Spock there. And alternate Uhura is to be taken to the nearest starbase in custody for committing murder. But Uhura releases her and sends her off in Acris's ship, which Kirk is fine with, I guess. And meanwhile, Chekov introduces what he calls the Chekov protocols because of his experience with seeing his exact double who is a killer, basically, which makes me wonder, like, the Chekov protocols enacted in the future when changelings infiltrate Starfleet. I don't know. Anyway.
Interesting thoughts. But yeah, honestly, this whole resolution is just kind of,
like, people are doing things, but I'm not really sure why they're doing them. Like, I don't get why Uhura lets her go. And I don't think she or the writers do either. Like, what does she say? Alternate Uhura says, why? And Uhura says, maybe I just can't stand the idea of my twin being someone's prisoner. Maybe I want to give you the chance to find your way home. Maybe. Like, really? Is that enough motivation to... I don't know.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah. And then, so the very end, Kirk and Spock are discussing kind of everything that's happened, and Kirk is remembering alternate Uhura's words that someday he might encounter an enemy to be put down in, as you say, cold blood. And if you don't, if you insist on demonstrating your enlightened sensibility, mark my words, your restraint will cost the life of someone close to you. And
like his son?
We, as the audience, I guess, get a little flash of Spock dying in The Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
Obviously, Kirk and Spock don't get that. That hasn't happened for them yet. But we, as the audience, are reminded of that. And it's this weird ending where Kirk's like, it's just something she thinks is going to happen in the future. I'm sure it's nothing. So if... And like, my thoughts when she first said those words... I was first thinking of David on the Genesis planet and Kirk killing Krug at the end of the movie. Like, that's where my mind went. So when I scrolled a little further and saw this Wrath of Khan thing, I'm like, okay, well, the enemy that needed to be put down in cold blood, that decision would have come in the original series in Space Seed, because, like, basically I don't know. And that struck me as a weird parallel to make. Like, I don't know. I expected when I got there to see Kirk's boot over the face of Krug hanging on the cliff, or David with the worried look on his face with the Klingon rearing back with his duck tog behind him, right? Like, I thought I'd see that. So I don't know. I kind of get what they're trying to say there, but I don't know.
It was...
He got Spock back anyway, so...
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No do-overs for David. No.
No.
The end of this felt like a really big letdown to me.
Yeah. So yeah, let's get into that then. So issue number 5, this is the culmination of the story. What are some of your thoughts on this and how this story ends?
I was willing to give this a go. I was kind of a little hesitant at first. I'm like, oh, not another alternate universe thing. I thought it was going to be Mirror. It turned out it wasn't. I'm like, okay, this might be good. And that goodwill carried me through until the end, at issue 3 and the end of issue 3. And then I just went, oh, where is this going? And by the end of it, by the end of issue 5, it just feels like nothing has been resolved, and that all of this was basically just unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people doing things, again, like I say, for reasons that I don't understand, and I don't think they understand, and a lot of other people enabling them. Like, Kirk's like, they find out Uhura let the other Uhura go. And Kirk's like, yeah, I kind of expected that. Don't worry about it. Kirk out. Like, that seems to be the message of this. Like, don't worry about it. Don't think too much about it. Just let it be.
Well, that's the thing, though. It seems in this particular thing, and this is a big no-no in storytelling, the characters were there to serve the plot. The plot was not there to serve the characters. You cannot tell a story without your characters being your characters. And basically they just used them as chess pieces to move around however they saw fit in order to tell this story and get this ending. Mm-hmm. And so we've got people acting completely out of character, and their motivations are not believable for most of this story. And so again, it just comes down to me feeling like, why? This entire story was completely unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't really get what the final message of this is. Mm-hmm. Like, it's kind of not a great message if the implication of seeing Spock dying there is that Kirk should kill bad people in cold blood. Like, is that the lesson here? That, like, if he doesn't employ a worldview like the alternate Uhuras, then bad things will happen. So he should do that. I don't think that's the message, but, like, I can't help but think somebody thought that was the message when they were putting this together. And then, like, or is the message forgiveness and letting the General Uhura go for what she did? Like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm left with here.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's unnecessary. Did it add anything to this particular time period in Star Trek?
Mm-hmm.
Did it have any ramifications whatsoever on anything?
Yeah.
No, it was unnecessary.
Yeah. And, like, even the thing that was brought up in issue number 1 that I was hoping would get paid off at some point here, where is the Enterprise going at the end of this? Is it returning to Earth to deliver Kirk back to the job that he's shirking? I doubt it. Where are they going?
Are they continuing their shakedown? Because that's what they said this was a shakedown. I'm like, why is Kirk still there if it's a shakedown cruise?
And I mean, they engaged in battle. They obviously needed medical things that they didn't have. I think you should probably end the shakedown cruise and go home. Mm-hmm. Like, that would seem to be the responsible thing to do. I doubt that's what's happening. And I just want to know.
Yeah. It's just, whew. And, you know, I like to be generous when dealing with Star Trek comics because Star Trek is so near and dear to me, but this left me cold.
Yeah, me too for the most part. And I mean, there are things that I enjoyed in it.
Yes, there are enjoyable things. I'm not saying that the entire thing was, you know, left me cold, but there's just too much stuff in there that was just, you know, like someone playing a bad improv game that I'm like, I'm not 10 years old playing, you know, Wonder Woman with my sister. Okay. And just, we're making up the rules as we go along. And that's just what this felt like.
Yeah. This final issue especially just felt like, we've got to do this, and this to get the story ended. And again, like I said, there's some good writing. There's, like, in microcosm, there's some good moments. I think overall, story-wise, it needed a few more trips to the storyboard process. But yeah, I don't know. I guess final thoughts overall for the miniseries and a rating for Echoes. He asked trepidatiously.
Oh, I'm not going to be terrible or mean. That's not my way. I had hopes for this because at first I thought, why do this at all? Why are they even tying this to the motion picture? Why is the motion picture in the title? Again, unnecessary. So that was just one of those things where I'm like, what are they doing with this? And unfortunately, that feeling carries through the entire series. It's kind of a mess. And I feel like, again, there are characters acting out of character to serve the plot. Never a good idea, ever. And it made their motivations suspect. It made their thought process as suspect. And I just was not happy about that. There are some wonderful dialogue moments. There are some wonderful little moments. Most of them revolve around Spock. There is one point, and I can't remember which issue it was in, and I think it was Kirk saying it to Uhura. I can't remember. It's all kind of jumbled together, but he says something to the effect of "Don't bury yourself in the part," which is something that McCoy says to Scotty in Star Trek IV when they're trying to get their hands on, well, they give this guy the formula for transparent aluminum. So.
Yeah, that was issue number 2 when Uhura is pretending to be the alternate Uhura. They're leading him off the shuttlecraft.
I thought that was it, but I couldn't 100% remember, but I giggled at that. So there are some good moments in this, but I feel overall that it's just one giant bester.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I was kind of left cold by the story overall. But yeah, there are some brief moments here and there that I thought genuinely were great. And also, like, it's that inconsistency in story carries through with the art as well. There are some art pieces, I think every time it's ships, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. And there's a few character likenesses that are so well done. There's the conversation between Sulu and alternate Uhura in the corridor, and after Uhura calls their universe soft, there's this shot of Sulu where I think he looks more shocked than he should, but it is a great shot of Sulu. Like, it looks so much like him. It's really well done. This Akris guy is supposed to look like Chekov, and half the time, like, there was one point where I thought he was a Romulan, and I was like, wait, no, that's Akris. That's the guy that looks like Chekov. Whoops. I had to reread that scene because I was like, I was totally mixed up there. It's not great in some areas, which is unfortunate, especially if you're doing a story that has to do with doppelgangers who look exactly like your crew. That said, Uhura looked good pretty much every time. So, there's some strengths there as well. But yeah, I was not overly impressed with it, which is unfortunate because it had a lot of things going for it, I think, that would bring me on side early on. But ultimately, yeah, it just kind of didn't end very satisfactorily. So I'm going to give this 2 extra E's in the word these in Chekov's final little soliloquy thing about the Chekov protocols, which we never even got explained what those are, by the way.
No.
But yeah, that whole speech, it was like for the first half of it, they forgot to put in the weird accent, but just the word these, for some reason, he's like, these. And it's like, he doesn't even say that word like that. Like, what? Okay, relax, Dan. Anyway. It's a bunch of extra E's in Chekov's speech that don't need to be there. That's my rating.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good rating to describe how we feel.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious for any of our listeners who read these issues. What do you think? Do you agree with us? Do you wildly disagree with us? Was this really a great miniseries to you? Let us know. We want to hear from you. There will be the post on the Positively Trek discussion group. You can talk about it there, or feel free to email us positivelytrek@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. All that's left is to say thank you to my esteemed co-host Brandi for joining us. Brandi, thank you so very much.
It's always a pleasure, even if I don't have the highest opinion of what we talked about.
I always enjoy new Star Trek, even if it's not great.
Agreed.
I think there's a lot to be gained from discussing things like this. And
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, thank you for discussing it with me, and I hope everybody enjoyed this episode, and we will see you in the next one. So until then, thanks again, and stay positive. Positively Trek is produced and edited by me, Dan Gunther, and co-produced by Barry DeFord on Treaty 8 territory, the home of the Beaver, Cree, Dene, and Métis people, whose histories, languages, and cultures we respect. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations.